Hi, how are you today? What's going on? How are things? I am wanting to kind of talk about this notion of being bored with one's identity, and you can extend this notion to being bored with one's ongoing experience, you could say. I think the framing of this is I'm trans, right? And I have made 300 videos on YouTube. Some of them good, some of them great, some of them amazing, and some of them not so good. But a lot of them are trans related, and a lot of this audience that I've built up is trans related. But it's not interesting to me to talk about the same problems that I've been going through, or even framing it in the same way. And I've been struggling with this because it's what I make, it's how I make, and it's how I've shown up. And so every time I come to making a video, I feel like, okay, like show up as the Ashley Adamson that your audience knows and is familiar with, and talk about it and be about it the same way that you're used to showing up and they expect you to show up. And there's a part of me that's like, nah, you've kind of evolved and you've changed in a lot of ways. And because of that, it's not fitting with you. And I find this ironic because this is the same issue that I went through before I transitioned, which was the more time I spent with understanding my identity and who I was and what that identity was in real life versus what it was inside me, you know, because you have an internal self and external self. The further the internal self and the external self diverge, the more tension you have between these two things. And in communication theory, this is called cognitive dissonance, right? So it refers to music. You have two frequencies, and when they play together, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's not dissonance, it's the opposite. But when they're playing in conflict with each other, that's dissonance. And so the same thing is with two thoughts. When you have a negative thought and you have a positive thought, and they start to get further and further apart, you have what's called cognitive dissonance. And I am experiencing some level of identity dissonance, or maybe it's YouTube personality dissonance. I don't know. But think about this as you kind of like show up in the world, your own thoughts and how you feel who you are versus how you present who you are and how you experience how you are in different situations. For example, in work, the personal dissonance that you may experience is a bit greater because you have to perform a certain way, you have to show up a certain way, and you're expected to show up a certain way. Sometimes you can't let some of those things that you're dealing with show up at work, right? Or if you're at school. So there is like this level of dissonance that I'm experiencing in terms of who I am now versus who I am known to be on YouTube. And then like there's this additional layer, which is I'm late stage transitioning now. Like this is something that's been ongoing for 5 years. I'm in LA right now. I travel to LA every month. I buy a plane ticket and I go down to see Dana Elise and get my electrolysis. And I do this every single month. It's quite an investment of time and money. And like, it's hella painful getting all of those injections in my face and in my bottom. And sometimes I'm crying. I think I cry every single time. And I mean, like, how would you feel if you had freaking nails shoved right up in your face and like all down in your genitals? It's just like, oh my God. And the worst part is the painkillers, to get the painkillers to really disperse, they stick the needle in and then they rub it around when they're inside. Like the only thing that I want rubbing around inside is, you know, my favorite thing. But like, you know, jokes aside, it's like, okay, so I'm experiencing a lot of pain. I'm actually probably experiencing more pain than I've ever been in through my transition, physical pain. Yet there's the least amount of complaints. There's the least amount of me talking about it. And it feels almost just like a given in my experience and not something to even have a conversation about. And I wonder, like, why am I not talking about this? Why this is ripe for transition material? Well, yes, but it's not who I am anymore. Like, my transition and my identity have moved. Like, my transition is still like tied to time, and if you're transitioning, you understand that. But I think when you're earlier in your transition, earlier transitioning people have their identity more tied up in their transition because it is the most significant and all-enveloping experience and transformation of your entire life. If you are transitioning, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, how much time does it consume? And if you're not transitioning, this is fine, because there's still something important here, which is, like, how do you allow your experience to be changing the way that you see the world, and how much of it affects you in a way where it changes how you identify? Am I even asking the right question here? Let's just keep going. And then with the consistency of this thing that you're dealing with, let's say you're dealing with a health problem, right? Let me just use a more tangible example. If you're dealing with a health problem and you can't really escape it, and you deal with every day, it kind of becomes a part of your identity, right? If you're a student and you're dealing with having to go to school and it's difficult for you, it kind of becomes a part of your identity. You're a student, it's hard, it's struggling. I mean, this is just for anything. And so it's there and it becomes a part of you. But at what point do you send the ship off and let that go? At what point do you say, fuck it, I don't care anymore, it's not me? Or do you just go deeper into this thing and you allow the repetition of the struggle, of the story, become so deeply ingrained within you that it occupies you and it becomes who you are? And how do you, at some point you evolve. So how does that evolution happen for you, where you evolve past the thing that you've identified as? What changes in your life have to create this divergence? And then how do you reconverge? And I see this all the time with trans people on my YouTube who are like, how do I come out at work? How do I tell my wife? I don't know where I'm at, but I know that I'm not where I usually am. And, you know, it starts with just like experimentation and cross-dressing, or just like you've always known, but those people don't need to watch my videos because they're not finding it as confusing. And at some point you have to merge. You have to merge the PR. If you're a developer, you know what I mean. Like, at some point the code diverges so much from the main branch that you need to bring it back. And so, like, I'm trying to figure out how to bring it back in terms of this YouTube channel, and I don't really know how to bring it back, except maybe just talking about it and bringing it back to you in this way and elevating it to this personal growth and development topic. And by the way, if you're still watching this, please like this video. Please subscribe if you aren't really subscribed, and please join to support this channel's growth. If you want other people to see this video and help me grow it, I need funds to basically grow it. But, like, I am trying to figure out what to do next. And I think this is kind of the same thing as a transition, which is kind of the same thing as any transformation and any kind of divergence of one's life path. There's this dispersal. I am no longer a trans YouTuber identifying. I am a trans person. I feel like I'm a YouTuber, but I don't even know what kind of content I'm going to make. And it's driving me nuts because I have so many other things that I'm focusing on that I have to do well at. I have to do well at my job. I have to learn how to code. And I'm programming all the time. And then I have to, like, make friends in Seattle, and I have to take care of my mental health, and I shouldn't always be productive because that doesn't make me happy either. And it's like, where do you find space because I mean, I don't make enough through this YouTube for it to be my full-time job, and I'm not expecting it to. So it's like, where do I carve the space for you and for time with you in a way where I don't feel like I'm now a slave to the thing that I've created. I'm not putting myself into slavery of the algorithm. And that when I show up with you, that it's authentic and that it makes me happy and that it's an additive thing to my life. And like the way I see this for you, it's kind of like this projects thing. Like, have you ever volunteered for a project and you've done it for a while and at some point it starts to kind of, it's a real commitment, right? How, like, do you keep going or do you move on? Like, where do you draw that line? So, like, I think my conclusion at the moment has been, like, either go back to your fundamentals, find the core value of why you started doing this in the first place, and keep doing it for that reason, which is what I'm doing now. Like, making these videos has been like therapy for me without a therapist, right? Like, you are my rubber duck. You are the person that I am speaking to that doesn't speak back, but I get your comments and it does affect me. So like, there is a level of therapy there. Second of all, it's transparency. Creating a level of transparency between you and me is a way that I feel like I can authentically share who I am with the rest of the world. And more importantly, I can share thinking and ways of approaching problems that enables you to grow and think about your problems and ways in which that you can make your life better. And that fills my spiritual that's my spiritual dimension. Like, if it feels like it fills my heart, but it fills my spirit heart, if that makes any sense. But then it's like, I'm the one who has the hook. Like, you can stop watching my YouTube videos. You can just, like, the algorithm won't show you to me anymore, which, by the way, if you do want to see me, you should probably hit that bell icon down there in the subscribe section. But like, you just stop watching one of my videos and the algorithm may never show me to you again. And that's it, goodbye. No commitment on your end. But I'm on the hook here where it's like, well, you were making videos, you built an audience, you still gotta make those videos. Do I step back? How do I quit? Like, do I quit? Like, there's this whole concept of focus. And focus in a startup mentality way. Like, you have to focus when you are building a company, and the more focused you are, the better you're going to execute. However, if you are doing multiple projects, that makes it a lot harder for you to execute and do really well at what you're doing. The thing that I find contention with this concept, because it makes a lot of sense, is that sometimes you don't have the same amount of brain space to do certain things and execute well on them. For example, me speaking into a camera and making a video, it activates a very different part of my brain than me sitting in front of code and solving a problem. They are very different. They do take a certain amount of energy, but I can't just do one forever. I can switch over to another thing. And so I can maximize my energy output in terms of productivity, energy to productivity output, by making you a video and then switching over to coding. But where do you draw that line? And when you're thinking about your brain and your biology and your equilibrium, like, what are the sort of life patterns that you need to allow replenishment for yourself? This is all about mental health. This is all about growing as an individual and also finding ways to maximize your productivity while like not maximizing past the point that's healthy for yourself. Like, I would rather be, I mean, which would you rather be? Would you rather be like perfect on one thing and exhausted? Or would you rather feel like you're doing really well at a lot of things and it's more fulfilling, but maybe you're not able to do any of them 100%? I struggle with this. And so if you're feeling like, you know, I'd rather do one thing 100%, I'm with you. I would actually rather do one thing 100%, but I can't. I have my transition. I have my job. I have this. I have my coding. I'm traveling because of this transition stuff. It's like, at what point does life get in the way and that you can't not just do one thing? Like, it kind of doesn't let you do this. This is the challenge of life, I suppose. So Yeah, I mean, like, I'd like to hear from you and see how you would approach something like this. What's going on in your world, and how are you finding balance for yourself? And then how are you maximizing versus minimizing? What's your stance on this dissonance concept of your character, and how do you merge back in? How do you transition from one thing to the other? I'd love to hear from you. See you in another episode soon. Bye.